two others of his three C's, as he calls them. Those would be climate change and critical race theory, all of which unfortunately have to do with the Chinese Communist Party and its operations. And Bill, there's so much more to say about investment in China and what's going on there that is endangering our national security. But so is another facet of the Chinese agenda, something they call global governance, whereby they're using international organizations like the World Health Organization, for example, and events or agendas or meetings like the Pt.2, as it's called, the UN Climate Change Conference taking place as we speak in the United Arab Emirates, to try to get essentially submission from all the nations in the world, including ours, to whatever the agenda is. And it seems to always have as its common denominator that it's going to be good for China. It will somehow become more of a power, certainly relative to others. Talk a little bit about this climate change business. You've studied it on the course of your program and the degree to which it really is part of a toxic brew aimed at taking us down.
Well, first and foremost, we need to get the problem that CO2 has been called a pollutant, and there are very many smart people that think CO2 is actually quite beneficial to humanity and the earth.
We don't know. Well, breathing out, for example, has something to do with it.
Plants grow 3 times larger if there's more of it. And we're at the dangerously low levels of CO2 relative to our millions of years of life on Earth. But that's a longer conversation. When it relates to the 3 C's, climate, China in particular, China sees the World Health Organization and the United Nations and the other global governance organizations as a way to accomplish what they can't accomplish militarily. And if you're Xi and you're thinking, gee, I wish I could get the US and Western economies to shut down. And oh, by the way, we'd like to exercise political control over freedom of movement and speech. What would we do? Well, we might use something like the COVID lockdowns as a pretext for that. And in a way, I think the COVID lockdowns may be just a trial run for what could be coming. At the World Health Organization, they're now beginning to declare that climate is a bigger health issue than was the virus. And of course, the president of the World Health Organization is a pawn of President Xi. He's a fully owned operative. And they're pushing for rules which would say in the event that the World Health Organization declared an emergency, and by the way, what they define as an emergency is basically anything that they choose to define it as, they can demand that the signatory organizations, countries rather, comply with their edict. And that could be anything. It certainly would be speech. It certainly would be movement, freedom of movement. It would certainly be access to critical medicines, unless you were in the favored group. So it's a totalitarian nightmare that's being engineered through the World Health Organization. And again, I come back to the Biden administration. They are fully complicit, giving up our sovereignty to the World Health Organization. And every American who cares about their freedom ought to be pushing back on this as hard as they can.
No, you're so right, Bill. And one other piece of it, which underpins everything that you've just said, is they are in the process of putting into place, as we speak, what we call a digital gulag.
Yeah.
A means of surveilling and monitoring and collecting big data and otherwise being able to reach out and exercise control over everybody in the world. I mean, this sounds unbelievable, but it is afoot, as you say. And come May of next year, it's supposed to be blessed by the Biden administration and every other nation on earth, and begin to come into effect as a means of exercising this kind of global governance through a Chinese cat's paw called Tedros Ghebreyesus at the WHO. So, Bill, I salute you for your clarity on this point as on so many others. We really need the American people alive to this danger and encouraging their members of Congress, who in the case of the House of Representatives, by the way, have actually zeroed out in the appropriations bill for next year, actually this fiscal year now, funding for the WHO. That should be the final word on the subject. It's not just yet, but we need their help on it. Let me pivot to critical race theory, and in particular, the idea of the United States military indoctrinating its personnel to embrace it, and the diversity, equity, inclusion, and LGBTQ and gender dysphoria transformation, agenda. It's just mind-boggling, and yet the Senate of the United States is balking at the idea that they're actually going to vet and, please God, disapprove general officers who are enthusiastically embracing this agenda. Your thoughts?
Well, the heart of the matter issue with CRT, critical race theory, and DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion in the military and all the other institutions where it's being forced, is it strikes at the heart of meritocracy. And it strikes at the heart of promoting the best and brightest who are the most effective, and instead replacing identity politics and color, skin color, sex, whatever, as the criteria for promotion. And we've got some generals and admirals that are being pushed for promotion in the House. I'm sorry, in the Senate right now, that are all in on that agenda. And we're seeing a hollowing out of our military through this very pernicious ideology.
Absolutely. Bill, I want to thank you for being one of the signers of a very powerful letter to Senator Mitch McConnell and his Republican colleagues in particular that was issued by our Save America's Military Coalition last week. It's something that I hope everybody in this audience will take a look at saveamericasmilitary.org. There's an Align Act campaign there that, with basically a click or two of a mouse, will allow you to send a message to your own senators urging them to do their job, to spare our military this Marxist makeover that so many of these general officers that Joe Biden, surprise, surprise, wants to promote from becoming the leaders of our military going forward. At times such as this, for the reasons we've just been discussing, we cannot afford to have our military subverted. Bill, thank you for joining us. Come back soon. I hope the rest of you will do the same next time. I hope the rest of you will do the same next time. Until then, go forth and multiply.